Thank you for tuning in to Cyber Wise Guys. My name is Donny Frankel, and today, as always, I have my partner in crime, Greg Wilson.
Hello.
On top of
What's
that,
up, Danny?
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. We also have Mike with us. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing
What's up,
great,
Mike?
Danny. Thank you. Appreciate you and Greg having me here.
Awesome. Glad
Absolutely.
to have you.
Absolutely. I know it's not the first time we're chatting. No, we chatted in the past, but hopefully now it's a little bit, I would say, more. It's going to be a more in-depth conversation, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more cyber-wise, if you will. So thank you for joining the Cyber-Wise Guys podcast today, and looking forward to learning from you about your activities and the technologies that you work with. But maybe for our listeners and viewers, would you mind maybe take us through a little bit of who you are and what you do in cybersecurity?
Sure. So I work at M&T Bank in Buffalo, New York, and I am a cybersecurity architect for
Hmm.
our cloud deployments. I specialize on the Azure platform, which I've been working on for 6 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. Also taking on responsibilities on our Google Cloud platform.
Hmm.
And I work a lot with our risk teams and our application teams and monitoring teams and to help figure out taking frameworks and turning them into controls on the different cloud systems and providing guidance to our application teams and infrastructure teams on the types of things we want to see implemented to secure the platform.
Gotcha. So maybe to start off, and again, this is not specifically for M&T, but can you maybe touch a little bit of what are the latest cybersecurity trends that you see in the financial market?
So there's a lot going on. I think as with the multi-cloud and all the different types of deployments and integrations and things, the people are finding more and more ways to secure our environments. There's more of a need, and we're constantly seeing new products coming out on the market with new capabilities to help secure that. Especially with generative AI being introduced into so many cyber products, but there's a lot that goes on that's beyond product selection and implementation. So some of the things that we're seeing, really in no particular order, there's the use of and integration of AI into monitoring tools in the industry. There's a lot of people that are really excited about the integrations, but the use of AI introduces risks of its own. And we're seeing our educational facilities, things like ISC2, ISACA, are coming up with educational programs for not just implementing AI, but how to secure it. I'm really interested in what are the risks and what controls can I find and implement on our platforms to help reduce the risk to an acceptable level.
Right.
Dozens of analytics products are rushing to include AI, and the use cases go well beyond analytics.
Yep.
Cell
Mhm.
phones, everything. So we pay particular attention to anything that's off the shelf that integrates AI, and so there's a lot of attention that's put on that.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, the growth of AI teams, AI governance, from my standpoint, is what we work with, and risk, so that we can secure those properly. We're seeing a shift from really controls based into a risk based approach to determining cyber risks, cyber controls for application and platform implementations and things like that. And then third party integrations. I think people have really realized that a lot of the issues in the cyber world really get into third party integrations. We saw, of course, many years ago with Target. We had the third party um, left the systems open there, and we constantly seeing over and over again somebody got um, impacted because a vendor left something open.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot more attention paid to those relationships and how they're being worked with and maintained. Zero trust, of course,
Yep.
still is on everybody's radar and is very active. It's as we've been saying for several years, identity is the new control plane. So identity and access management is more important than ever. SIAM, or for customer IAM strategies, are being implemented more for companies that are public facing, especially us. We have a huge customer base, and we need to make sure that their data and information is available to them where they are when they need it. So that's of course very important. And then automation with hyperconverged data centers and infrastructure applications are being deployed with Terraform and other automation platforms. We get to I really create the platforms in a more consistent way, which is very important. So once we get secure, repeatable patterns, the deployments, errors are less, and in theory, we have fewer vulnerabilities. They're easier to identify, easier to fix.
Yeah.
So, and of course, we want to keep an eye on configuration creep when we're using
Yeah.
automation to make sure things stay the way we configured them.
Absolutely.
Very busy.
Absolutely. Hey, Mike, you bring up a good point about AI um, really having a making a difference in how we as defenders defend our networks, and especially in the financial industry, because the last 12 biggest breaches last year affected more than 65 million Americans. And your point where you're bringing up this layered defense and using AI to really improve that layered defense, I think is going to be very critical to defending our networks and our environments in the future. But I am
Yeah.
curious, though, in the last for you in a financial institution, how have you seen the threat landscape really evolve for you in this particular area of business?
So a lot of the threat landscape, it really is consistent with things over the past. Of course, we have people poking around the edges, trying to break into the systems. We still deal with social engineering, spam, phishing emails, somebody stopping at a branch and chatting up a teller trying to get a user ID and a password and things like that. So there's that consistency, which we still need to maintain. But as I had mentioned earlier, third parties really do open the door, especially when you're getting software from somebody. Everybody rushed to the cloud. Even though there was a lack of talent or a lack of understanding how to properly and securely implement their software. Um, but now everybody's rushing into AI. So, I mean, personally, I'm kind of tired of getting letters from companies that I have no relationship with. I got one 2 weeks ago. We provide data services for your doctor, and here's how I read them. We didn't care enough to secure your data. So
Right.
have a free year of credit monitoring. And I think there's needs to be more attention paid to that.
Mm,
We certainly do our diligence with third party relationships.
hmm
It involves many teams at the bank that analyze the relationship, the company, the software, their infrastructure.
Right.
So we give them a good once over, and it's consistent, and it's something that we return to on a regular basis to ensure that they are keeping their word. So,
And
um, yeah,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, I thought you will finish. You finished, and I wanted to jump into the next question that I had for you because you've mentioned you've mentioned something that piqued my interest. But I'm going to let you kind of like finish up your thought there before cutting you off brutally and unfriendly in an unfriendly manner.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, you're so mean, Danny.
Yeah, no, I was going to finish just by saying, as everybody rushes to the cloud, everybody rushes into AI. There's a huge skills gap in the cloud. There's a
hmm
huge skills gap in AI, and even in implementing it properly.
hmm
There's a huge skills gap in cybersecurity. So, but meanwhile, everybody's running forward at full speed, tripping over themselves. So that really lends itself to creating software or maybe environments that maybe aren't as secure as we would hope they would be. So it's incumbent on all of us to, when they say if you see something, say something, slow down, do it right. We had a discussion with the vendor the other day about how they wanted to access some data in our Azure environment, and they're like, we only do it this way. And we were like, well, that's not secure. We want you to do it this way. And they're like, well, that's basically what we heard. What we heard was that's too hard. We don't want to. It's unacceptable, right? You got to plan right. Shift left, secure first, software design, even if it's hard for the developers, they need to take the time and do it correctly, because we always say there's never any time to go back and do it again.
Now, Mike, you've mentioned earlier the risks of AI and jumping into it without proper assessing the risks and so forth. But I think that at least one of the vendors that we know providing AI, right, or leading the AI market on the security space at least, right? The idea, and I'm saying that I want to reach to the point where you said that there is a skills shortage in the security space. Isn't the whole idea of AI is to mitigate, or at least in some point help mitigate that shortage, especially for an organization that has a larger team of security people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I mean, right. So we implement AI strategies in our monitoring and our response teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we could reduce the staffing size at the CSOC,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's kind of the end of the chain,
Gotcha.
because up front, okay, well, we want to use this software. Well, we go through a huge risk assessment up front. So we need people who are experienced in risk management.
Gotcha.
Then, once they're willing to accept A, the vendor, and B, the risks of the software, and they're working with the cyber teams, my teams, to review the software. How is the software designed? What controls does the vendor have? And then, of course, it has to be implemented properly on our side. So while we're improving response times and efficiencies and maybe holding steady or reducing the size of the people that are doing the monitoring and the response, there's still
Mm-hmm.
a ton of work that goes in to get to that
Yeah.
point.
Well, and a real part of having staffing, not only for the level of manning that you have, resources you have to put towards uh, holding a whole security team as a separate function, but also you have to look at how are these guys being worked, right? I spent my time in a SOC early on in my career in the Department of Defense, and burnout is a real thing. And so these AI tools can help with reducing that burnout, because those same rote tasks that you see over and over
Yeah.
again, where eventually you have so many things going on, and then you end up, when you're not doing that, you're filling out, compliance spreadsheets for no apparent reason. Those kind of things that can be done by AI. I think that really helps to reduce that burnout. You get a higher quality analyst and security personnel on your team when you're using AI as well. And I've talked to the young, and I don't mean young by age, but by experience, young cybersecurity people coming into the field, and they're like, "Well, AI is going to take my job." And my response is always, "AI is not going to take your job, but an analyst who knows how to use AI will take your job."
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
it's a critical feature for them to begin to use AI and to make it a part of their daily operations.
Yeah. So did you work nights and weekends?
Uh, yeah, we got a few of those 2 a.m. calls. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
always
So,
fun.
I mean, of course, we have 24-hour monitoring.
Hmm.
So we have, people who are watching the monitors at 3 in the morning,
Hmm.
people on the weekends, holidays. Right. I was in the military.
Yeah.
You never take time off.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of that. And I mean, I've done work on my time on the help desk,
Hmm.
and I took a quote from one of my favorite books, and said, the tickets will always be among you, because it's just they never go away, and the
Yeah.
alerts will never stop. So alert fatigue is something that industry has been trying to solve for 15, 20 years now, maybe
Right.
longer. And we're no closer because we keep creating more complex systems,
Right.
more clouds, more
Hmm.
vendors, more alerts.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
alert fatigue. Go
Microsoft
ahead.
just did a study where they found on average that their customers have anywhere between 60 and 80 third-party tools used in their entire cyber environment on
Yeah.
average. Yep.
Right. And then we had seen, I know Danny and I had talked about this a while ago. When you have tools from disparate vendors, you spend a good
Hmm.
portion of your time, I think the number was up to 30%, trying to keep those tools talking to each other.
Right.
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 So, um, if you're trying to do best in class for all of the different functions in your
Hmm.
security stack, or really even in your data center, and things need to talk to each other,
Yeah.
you really need to plan proper staffing to ensure those integrations are maintained.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so for you've mentioned the monitoring, the 24/7 monitoring, Mike, but can you share a little bit of some best practices from the banking industry as it relates to maybe SOC operations, right? What do you find, or maybe sharing some insights on what would be the best practices to maintain monitoring or SOC, aside of having the best people that money can buy with that would sit around the clock 24/7 watching monitors.
Well, I'm just, as we bring that up, I'm just going to say that is not somewhere that I have any expertise in.
Hmm.
I sit in my function at the bank is well before that. Well, we work with those people. I really don't do a lot of work with the operations of the SOC, so I'm
Okay.
probably not the best person to ask for that.
Okay, we'll take that offline and we'll see who he is, and we're going to bring them up as well, maybe for
Well,
maybe
Mike,
for
that
our
actually
next
brings up
episode.
There are
exactly.
people I could call, but they might all be busy right now.
Mike, that actually brings up a good point. Some of the younger cybersecurity analysts or aspiring analysts always say to me, "Well, I can't find a job. I can't find a job." And I think what your experience here is informative of that, because an experienced cybersecurity person like yourself has now moved into a management architectural role. Right, you're not on the ground anymore doing your thing because you are needed at another level. And now we've got new guys that are coming because of the shortage. I think what has happened is we also have guys that are wanting to come in, and those new guys, brand new cybersecurity people, have flooded in because there's a lot of opportunity. And I think where we have the greatest stress is with our journeyman level cybersecurity analysts, where these guys we need between 5 and 10 years, or maybe 3 to 5 years of experience, and you don't get that right away. The only way to get more experience is to get more experience. So I think there's also a challenge there with bringing up journeyman analysts too, so that we don't have this really, I don't want to say hollow, but a hollowing of the cybersecurity field.
So I think it's important for people to understand that, cybersecurity, working in cybersecurity doesn't mean one thing, right?
Right.
Danny asked me about the SOC. I don't work in the SOC, but there's threat hunting, threat modeling,
Mm-hmm.
risk assessments, there's architecture, there's so many different fields, and there's no one path. The way I landed in cybersecurity is different from the way somebody else landed in cybersecurity. I actually have a mainframe background, and
Mm-hmm.
ended up working in a Windows client server private cloud environment, and then transitioned into AWS and Azure, and it all just kind of fell into place as I was looking for different things to do, always looking for something new, right? We got to be a
Mm-hmm.
lifelong learner. I don't like doing the same thing over and over again, which was one of the
Mm-hmm.
issues that I had working on the help desk.
Right.
Um, Right, you get these users can't open Word. Well, you couldn't open
Yeah.
Word yesterday. What did we do? Oh, I don't remember. And I'm being
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
little
Spend some time at
dramatic.
the help desk. Yeah, I get it.
I'm being dramatic, but still. So there's, as we move into past entry level, so I think there has to be a little give and take on what people's expectations are for where they can land,
Mm-hmm.
be realistic. But also, I think that a lot of employers or hiring managers also need to be realistic. And you're talking journeyman level, but
Mm-hmm.
even entry level. I see on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn every now and then this comes to the surface every now and then. Somebody will post unrealistic job postings for entry
Yeah.
level. Wanted an entry
Right.
level security operations center employee, right? Must have
Mm-hmm.
5 years experience with these 12 things. Okay, well, that's not an entry level, that's a journeyman.
Right.
So
Right.
I think there's some give and take on both sides for that.
Right.
And also, especially for employers or hiring managers to come to grips with the fact that with so many open jobs and
Mm-hmm.
the limitations on the employee pool,
Mm-hmm.
while you can't train into every position, especially senior level positions, but there are some things you could give people an opportunity to get up to speed on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, sorry, go ahead, Greg.
No, I was just going to say that I believe that a really great way to begin to fulfill these roles, and like you said, in the journeyman position. And you're right, Mike. You can't. There are some levels you just can't, train to for from somebody that's starting at zero. But I think it's important to have a way to develop your team, not only for the fact that you have a solid way to replace those people who leave, but you also give these guys a goal to have, so they're not always having to be in that first that level one analyst role where they're responding. So that just makes it safer all the way around and creates that cybersecurity environment. If you guys are on the security team are excited and motivated about doing their job, then they're going to people are going to see that who are not on the cybersecurity team, and they're going to want to be part of that because they feel like they're making a big difference. So I guess one of my questions for you is, and along with the cybersecurity and training for individuals, what has been the approach in your organization for awareness and training for non-cybersecurity people? So, for example, the a lot of the advanced persistent threats out there are using phishing, spear phishing. Um, in defense against that is education. What is your organization doing to educate its non-cybersecurity people?
So we're a regional bank, right? So we have
Mm-hmm.
branches in multiple states. We're all over the place. So would be difficult to do like all employee meetings and talk about
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity and things like that. So we do have um, phishing awareness, cybersecurity
Right.
awareness training that people have to do on a regular basis throughout the year. So we have required training. Some of that's online. We have a cybersecurity champions program where a group of people come together and then a lot of that is done. We have an internal web page as well as regularly emailed emails so people are constantly seeing it throughout the year
Mm-hmm.
to think. And then, they might get an email, and if they click on the link, you know, hey, this was a test and you failed, kind of thing. So, yeah, so it is something that we do work on a consistent basis throughout the year. While October Cybersecurity Awareness Month,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we want people to be aware of 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah. You only need to get it wrong once, right? For everything
Yes.
to
Yes.
for the
Yeah.
system to
Right. We
crumble
have to
down.
be
So
right. We have to be right all the time.
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And so maybe to take a step back, and you've mentioned zero trust before, Mike, kind of like early on in the conversation. What does it look like for you, right? And what kind, or how do you implement, or when you think of zero trust, right? In your neck of the woods, if you will, right? In for regional bank in a bigger financial industry. what does zero trust mean to you, and how do you make sure that it's properly being implemented in your environment?
So we've had computers at the bank for many decades, right? So that means
Hmm.
we have systems that have built a lot of that architecture has been around for a long time. And while the bank is constantly going through modernization projects
Hmm.
to bring things in line, we still have some that we need to work through. So we have a zero trust framework as we implement new projects, new methodologies like our Azure deployment. Zero trust is on the forefront of everybody's thoughts as we build the platform and deploy applications there, as well as our other internal systems within our data center. So as things are being modernized and changed, Zero Trust is taking a forefront into that.
Mhm.
And of course, identity is huge on that. With we might have things like privileged access management implemented for certain things. Vendor and customer access, always monitor, right? You have monitoring and alerts. So we're back to the alerting thing.
Mhm.
Who's looking at the alerts? Is it
Hmm.
AI or is it a person? So
Mhm.
it's something that we are committed to at this point, and it's something that's in the works. But you remember, Google, of course, is much younger than we are. Google took 7 years to implement zero trust throughout the company. So um, so we're working on it. It's on the board. Everybody's taking it into account as we move forward, and one day we'll get there.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I have a feeling when we do, somebody's going to move the goalpost.
and I think that's the thing, Mike, is say zero trust is never, you're never ever going to say, well, we've arrived, we've done it, we've
Right,
achieved zero trust, right? It's exactly what you're saying. The moment you think you do, guess what? You haven't, because the
right.
attackers have now moved on to something different. So I think it's a great idea to look at it more of a journey on how you're moving towards zero trust. The motion, the fact that you're going that direction is important. And although you'll never achieve the zero trust thing exactly, as you'll never get there, the fact is you can't get there. You will never be able to achieve a perfect zero trust area. So
Right. There's no
yeah,
vendor that's knocking on your door saying, let me do a presentation on zero trust,
right,
our product for you, right? It's
right,
a combination of products, design
hmm
techniques, processes, procedures, monitoring. So, it's not just identity, right?
hmm
It's networking, it's
right,
monitoring, it's responses, it's threat
hmm
hunting. Um, so it's huge. It impacts everything we do.
yeah, absolutely. So I think it's also what's interesting about having a zero trust environment is like you said, there seems to be a lot of play towards identity because it is such an important factor, especially in cloud computing. But just like you mentioned, that whole idea of getting down the architecture as well, the network segmentation, the reduction of blast radius, all of those things are going to be important as well. So yeah, it's a never-ending journey for you,
Yeah,
for anyone that's approaching
yeah.
zero trust.
And of course, as we design the infrastructure and our
Mhm.
network and other controls around zero trust, of course, we have application teams who've been doing
Mhm.
things a certain way for a very long time, and now we're like,
Right,
whoa, you can't do that anymore. But
right.
we've always done it this way. So there's a lot of discussions with the application teams and
hmm
modernizing that. Of course, they're trying to modernize their stuff.
hmm
So it's impactful on
Yeah,
top of everything else that's going on.
absolutely, absolutely.
Now, maybe a different question that is not directly related to cybersecurity, but more to I would say, the compliance regulations and compliance, Mike. Is there any, I would say, again, I don't want to use the term best practices, but are there more, I would say, for you, from your perspective, are there regulations that you look at more, let's say, frequently compared to others in the finance industry or in the banking
So
industry?
as far as banking industry regulations, of course, we
Hmm.
have to adhere to Federal Reserve
Hmm.
regulations
Hmm.
at the federal level. But of course, the different states that we're in could have requirements beyond that to allow us to do business in their states. Like we're based in New York, so we have to adhere to New York rules and regulations on top of that, right? So
Hmm.
and then so our standards for security, that's one of the things that goes into our standards being defined. But then, of course, we have industry frameworks, and what's the best industry framework for us? Is it NIST? Is it
Hmm.
are there other standards that are out there? But then when it comes to implementing them, do we want to look at that? Do we want to look at the Center for Internet Security and look at their guidelines? I'm speaking for the cloud side right now.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, the Cloud Security Alliance, they have standards. And the nice thing about with the Azure and the other cloud platforms, I'm assuming also have this, is the pre-built policy in
Hmm.
relation to those
Hmm.
standards. So
Yep.
a lot of work goes into inspecting,
Hmm.
first mapping our standards to those
Hmm.
policy statements.
Yep.
Do they meet our needs? Do they need to be modified? They need to be rewritten, implemented, and then maintained. And of course, there's a concern that we could be using something out of the box for Microsoft, and then on the backside, Microsoft makes an update, and something we've done now stopped working, and
Hmm.
why did it stop?
Right.
Troubleshooting something like that can take a long time. So.
Hmm.
Yeah, so lots of work on the front end figuring out what frameworks and standards we want to use, but then we get into the mapping and the development of the policies and then the monitoring of the policies and the reaction to things that are outside of that framework. So
Hmm.
lots of interactions between the different teams on getting these things implemented.
Yeah.
Right? They say I'm just going to throw this in here. The cloud's great because if you want to deploy something, you could create an account,
Yeah.
spring up a VM or a web app, and you're in
Hmm.
business.
Right.
But if you're in a regulated industry like the financial industry,
Hmm.
financial services sector, it's not going to move that fast.
Right. Right. There's always going to be the compliance team that is going to be looking over your shoulder saying, hey, we understand the reason for this. However,
Yeah,
we
and
have compliance standards.
that might be why we're getting letters from companies we've never heard of that have our
Hmm.
data, is
Yeah.
because somebody worked for a vendor and they're like, well, I could do this better. And so he goes and builds a cloud system. And I'm just, throwing this out here,
Hmm.
builds a cloud system, writes some software, and then goes back to the old company and says, hey, we can service this for you. Well, they
Hmm.
forgot about, all the security controls. And then suddenly my medical records are in somebody else's hands.
Right. Right.
So, speaking of that, and what have you, there was I'm not. You probably don't know about this, but years ago there was a famous case in Israel that um, this a bank employee kind of like she was a teller, right, and to help her brother out of a jam, financial jam with the mob, she kind of like started slowly from every transaction take a few cents, almost like the movie Office Space, if you will, kind of like knock off
Yeah.
the decimals of a cent, if you will, to kind of like build up this fortune. And what ended up happening, she kind of like the bank went bankrupt after what she did. And so, speaking of threats, right? How do you mitigate against insider threats, if you will?
Yeah.
Again,
So,
not physically, but more on the cyberspace, if you will.
so of course, I mean, we do have training for, we have a lot of employees in public places. and physical threats from customers, from people wandering in off the street, and even in our offices, employee kind of thing. So we do have a lot of training that goes on again throughout the year. Your required annual training and then updates throughout the year on how to react to things like that. So, but of course, it's no surprise that a lot of our employees have access to very private and sensitive information about our customers and our account holders and people we do work with. So we take that very seriously here, and we have programs in place that monitor and react to any possible leaks. So not only are we looking for, so this is another case for the analytics when somebody does something that's out of the ordinary, right? There are certain steps that when you do a transaction or something, there are certain things that happen always in the same order. If there's an extra step, that might raise an alert that they did something they weren't supposed to do. So we have an insider threat mitigation team that monitors all that stuff and moves into action if something's out of the ordinary. So, but they also scour social media looking for things that
Nice.
maybe somebody did a screen print. Snapped their phone and posted to their friends. Wow, look at what I just saw, when that shouldn't be there. So there's constant monitoring of Facebook, Instagram, all the other social media things that I don't use, but yeah, they're out there. So, and then of course, I'm not a fan of social media. So yeah, and then once an alert is raised, they have their processes, their procedures, their ways of dealing with that.
Gotcha.
And of course, for the employee and of course, insider threats could be malicious or they could be inadvertent, right? Somebody could just make an honest mistake and something could get leaked. So, and of course, there's different levels of remedial action from, hey, you shouldn't have done that, to now I have to, write this up and put it on your permanent file, to, we don't need you around here. You're out of here. And oh, by the way, we called the police. So, so as a company who takes this very seriously, we have a great program in place that's constantly on the lookout.
That's excellent. I think just so you're talking about bringing AI into that is going to be to make it more efficient, to have AI being able to analyze the behavior of of each employee from what is normal. I mean, we can do that now, that even with just looking at log information, but being able to have an AI that can go and say, hey, well, look, this behavior is out of the ordinary for this person, for someone in this line of work or this job description, they shouldn't really be doing that. We should probably look into that. And I think it's also important too to not forget about the traditional ways of trying to prevent insider threats. Like either like job sharing or required vacations, that kind of thing, where you can have somebody else look over the work of somebody who has a job with lots of privilege, just to see if everything's on the up and up. So all of those things combined together, like at the beginning of our discussion about defense in depth. Another example of that in a more specific use case.
Of what are you asking here? Sorry. A use case for what?
Oh, no, I was just saying use case for the no, it's a good use case for we'll put this in the edit. A use case for for a insider looking for insider
right, that's right.
Yeah.
It's a perfect use case for AI, right? Because you have things that are, like I said, specific procedures are constantly followed. You need to check an account balance, you need to deposit a check, somebody needs to make a withdrawal. The process is typically the same, right? Yeah. So when there's an anomaly because the teller moved a penny somewhere else,
right,
that can be identified easily. Perfect for AI.
Danny, you think they got that from Office Space? I mean, it seems pretty classic.
So I've been in. So, Greg, not to state the obvious, I see you have some gray hairs. I have some too. I've been in this industry a long time. we were talking about, can I round up to this other field and drop it in my own account
Yeah.
decades ago. So
Yeah.
it's
So crazy. People
everybody
don't
wa-
think that they built the Texas for that. They just,
everybody wants to
I'm
round
going to
them
try
down.
it. I mean, nobody's ever heard of this before. It's only on a movie, the most famous movies of all time. So,
Oh.
Yeah.
So, guys, we're almost at the top of the episode here, but I do maybe have a couple of questions for you, Mike, as it relates to the future. And one is the future of cybersecurity in the banking industry, in the financial services industry. Obviously, we spoke about AI, and anything can happen, right? Who knows, right? Maybe the machines
Right.
will completely take over. Maybe it's going to be on a much smaller scale, like Greg said earlier. No, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone else who uses AI to do your job.
Yeah.
But as much as you can tell, or predict into the future, right? What do you see let's say in the next 5 years, because 10 years, who knows what's going to happen, but in the next, let's say 2, 3, 5 years, what do you see as the most important, um, I would say, trends, technologies, maybe processes even, to look for or to look at when it comes to cybersecurity in the financial services industry?
Well, I'd say over the next 5 years, our jobs are going to get harder. Uh, and I mean, as much as we like to believe AI is going to let me go hiking in the mountains more often, we're just really scraping the surface of the multi-cloud and hybrid cloud deployments,
mhm.
Hmm.
right? Especially in financial services, right? We need to move slowly and cautiously and with direction, to make sure that our customers' life savings are always safe. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to see more and more integrations with service providers, with other banks, transferring funds, doing analytics on that platform, pulling data from this other platform. There's a mortgage provider that needs access to do, I don't know, income checks. Just throwing that, I don't know, so. And then I have subscriptions to services you guys probably do too, where you get a few newsworthy cyber incidents of the day. They're not going down, they're not going away. So as we settle into the cloud, that matures more. I think our work is going to be a little more difficult coming up to
Yeah.
properly plan out, and the engineering teams to implement, and the monitoring teams to ensure there's no drift, and things like that. So um, I was looking a couple of days ago, reading an article. They're expecting 3.5 million cyber jobs next year to be available, with almost 1 million of those in the U.S.
Yeah.
So there's a definite need for smart people, people from different backgrounds,
Yeah.
to get into this.
So, with that, maybe what would be your advice for someone who wants to get into the cybersecurity industry, someone who's aspired to be a cybersecurity professional, if you will?
So, well, I was at a Gartner conference a couple of years ago, and this subject came up because it
Hmm.
hasn't gotten any better. And one of the presenters was talking about
Yeah.
this, and I found him at a happy hour later, and I'm like, I think I have a solution to this problem, and at least a partial solution. But I personally don't know how to work this out. When I was in high school, I went to a vocational school and I learned to be a
Mhm.
carpenter. Right. So when I graduated high school, or even before I graduated, I was working for a custom home builder, and I was out. I would come to school in the morning, and then after I graduated, full time working on houses, and then I went in the military. But I think if we had a system like that, for cyber or
Right.
technical, you could start people off in 11th grade here in the U.S. and get them to the point over the next 2 years where they could take these entry level jobs, working in the CSOC, working on the help desk, and then allow those people to move into the journeyman roles that we had
Mhm.
worked on later. And if it was an industry-wide accepted thing, we maybe have employers hire these kids out of high school with a certificate, keeping in mind it's entry level and they don't have 5 years experience, but then they could continue their college education, maybe working 4 to 6 hours a day or 2 to 3 days a week, and then classes the rest of the time. So that's a solution that I came up with for that. But people that are in the industry that want to get into cybersecurity. So like I said, I was trained to be a carpenter, but I ended up in IT. And the vastness of cybersecurity, when I got my master's in cybersecurity, the University of South Florida, where I graduated from, offers 4 different tracks on cyber. But if you look at other universities, they have different tracks for that. So there's tons of things to do. I would say, find something you think you're interested in. Do you want to work in forensics? Or do you want to work in risk management? And then try and get some education. But towards that, maybe check. I have my CISSP, but there's other certifications that could be worked on. And then join ISACA, join ISC2, go to the local chapter meetings, meet people, get advice. One of my friends through a club that I'm in, he was in between jobs, so he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, can we get together? And I want to work in cybersecurity. How do I get into that?" So we met and talked, and I'm like, let's keep it an open dialogue. But I talked to him a couple weeks later, and he was not just talking to me, but he was talking to everybody in his network. And networking is still the easiest way to find job.
Right.
And one of the guys that he talked to, he didn't know the guy owned an IT company. He was just asking for advice. And the guy's like, "Hey, I'm hiring for my help desk. Why don't you come to work for me?" And so he got a foot in the door. There was an agreement that he would help him work towards a role in cyber over time as he gained some experience. So that is certainly one way to do it.
Nice. It's interesting you say that, Mike, because my son is 14 and he's preparing to take his first Microsoft certification. And I led him down the road towards cybersecurity, doing exactly what you're talking about, is starting on the early education and then certifications, following your interests. I mean, I got him started by his interest in video games, of course, and then it led to a larger conversation until finally he's going to be taking this first Microsoft certification and keep going right on down the line with his certifications until he achieves his CISSP sometime when he's an adult, and then go wherever he needs to go from there. So I think what you're saying is a lot of common sense to it, and you're absolutely right. There's the only thing we know right now is the current system is not going to fix our cybersecurity deficit when it comes to talented people. So we've really got to do something different. And I think what you're talking about would be a good start.
Well, that sounds very optimistic, guys. Again, we're already beyond the time that we usually take to record those, and I would like to still keep it under the 45, 50 minutes time, right? As we always trying to do. But I want to thank you, Mike, Greg, as always, a pleasure.
Indeed.
Putting those sessions together with you and to our viewers and listeners. Thank you for tuning in to Cyber Wise Guys. Stay sharp, stay secure, and keep becoming Cyber Wise Guys. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.